get the feeling this is going to be my most disliked video. Hello one and all, Jasper here, and today I'm getting a few licks into this series before the second season comes out this year. Last time I talked about this show, I gave it a 6 out of 10, and I have to say, after thinking long and hard about it, I was being too generous. Because the more I sit down and really examine the flaws of this series, the more it pisses me off. In almost every single episode, there are massive hiccups and inconsistencies that are ridiculous and should not have gone unnoticed by the writers. And these aren't just changes from the books, I want to make that clear. I'm going to try to be very objective in this video. You won't hear me arguing and complaining about changes from the books, like Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra having a sexual relationship, or how they kept Leonor alive, or even making Alicent and Rhaenyra friends of a similar age. None of that. I'm also going to do my best to avoid any other kind of subjective criticism in this video. For example, it's a common complaint that the Blacks are portrayed to be far more morally superior to the Greens. And, well, that might not be a criticism to some of you. Some of you might actually want a simple good versus evil story. And some of you might disagree that the Blacks are morally superior to the Greens. After all, those motherfuckers got Daemon. At least none of the Greens have killed their wife to fuck their niece, alright? I am, however, saying that even if you've never read the books before, you should still have massive issues with how this story is told to us. I am taking the kitty gloves off for this video, and I am going to tear this show a new asshole because honestly, at the end of the day, I believe this is a garbage show that is blinding people with amazing acting, wonderful effects, beautiful music, and great direction. Ready? Then let's jump right into the very first episode. There are two massive flaws with the start of the series, and they take place at almost the exact same time. The first is the random bloody brawl that happens during the joust. It's just random violence for the sake of violence. Murder is being committed in front of everyone, and the people cheer and clap for it? The reason given is because the men down there have only known peace, and with balls of seed and thus are itching for war? What kind of retarded reasoning is that? Men don't just decide to kill each other because we haven't had sex or are just so desperate to kill something. By this logic, every MMA or kickboxing tourney should have at least one fatality. After all, most of these guys haven't been to war and knew nothing but peace, so why aren't they killing everyone they come across? Piss off. I don't think these writers have ever watched a combat sport, let alone experienced one, if they think that's all it takes. And it's not like this is just a one-off moment. It shows knights and warriors from families such as the Starks, Lannisters, and Mallisters all taking part in this one big bloody brawl. Where are the Gold Cloaks? We just saw them doing their job very enthusiastically the day before. And how would I fix it? Simple. I wouldn't have had it. If you need your bloodshed, maybe throw in an accidental death, a Blackwood or a Bracken, which results in the two families drawing steel to kill each other. Some lives are lost until the Gold Cloaks break them apart. The second episode is not nearly as egregious, but it does take Otto, probably one of the smartest characters in this series, if not the whole franchise, and makes him look like he has the same smooth brain as Varys at the end of his season. He stands up and can convince the king that Daemon is too dangerous for him to go and confront. King Viserys, who I remind you loves his brother, and I think it would be difficult if not impossible to convince him that he would be in any danger with said brother. Yet Otto decides to go himself? Am I supposed to think that Otto doesn't believe that Daemon wouldn't kill him, but would his brother? Because that's just silly. Or maybe Daemon wouldn't kill either of them, he just doesn't want Viserys to meet up with his brother. Because if that's the case, then the man is a fool. He knows that Daemon hates his guts, and if Daemon would ever kill anyone, he would likely be at the top of the list. Finally, he goes with 20 guards against a man with a fucking dragon and a castle filled with at least hundreds of men. They didn't bring anyone else as backup when they had the perfect option. Rhaenys Targaryen. At least she has the experience and a dragon of equal size to compete with Daemon, and at the very least, make him hesitate to kill everyone. Thank God Rhaenyra showed up and de-escalated everything, because best case scenario, this would have been a waste of fucking time. Worst case scenario, you would need a new Hand of the King, a new Grand Maester, 2 new members of the Kingsguard, and you'll have to promote one of those new guys to Lord Commander, since he is there as well. What the fuck was any of this supposed to accomplish? Hopefully the next episode will be much quicker to go over, and the first one I know will. Rhaenyra holding off a boar for 10 seconds? No. That is completely ludicrous. No human being, in my eyes, would be able to do that, and this just proves the boar was actually gentle and wanted to give her kisses. But the true blemish on this episode is actually the Battle of the Stepstones, as it is possibly one of the most illogical fights I've ever witnessed. We're talking Battle of the Bastards level here, people. Daemon uses himself as bait to draw out the entire army of the Crab Feeder. The men the Crab Feeder sends decides to fight Daemon in single file, perfect for the Dragon Prince to cut through them like wet tissue paper, and when arrows finally get him so injured that you could reasonably only have to send 3 to 5 guys to take him prisoner or kill him. That's when the Crab Feeder thinks it's a good idea to send the entire army. Not to mention, what happens when the dragons finally show up to save the day and the Velaryons rush into battle? The armies of the Triarchy engage them. Why in 7 hells would they do this? They can still run back into the caves where they would be safe from the dragons and wouldn't have to worry about getting outflanked by the Velaryons. The tactical ineptitude that is being put on screen is something that even Hot Pie would be able to point out as foolish. No, I'm sorry. Season 8 Tyrion would know this was a bad idea. Now, how would I make it better? Well, for starters, you need some bigger bait to draw out an army, not just one man. So how about this? Daemon is flying on Caraxes when a trebuchet manages to hit him, injuring Caraxes to a point where they can't fly or are forced to land and fall on the island. Arrows are loosed at them, but it proves ineffective. The hide of the dragon is too thick. So in goes the army with axes and spears to kill the legendary beast and the prince. Here you get Caraxes fighting off the army with its fangs, claws, and fire as the beast can, but the army swarms him, stabbing and hacking at him. You see bits of steaming blood showing that the damage is being done, and Daemon does his best to defend his dragon. We cut to Corlys and his brother in rowboats, sailing into some of the caves of the island. After all, they would need such caves, or else the invaders would just be able to smoke them out. They're able to swarm through the caves and eventually run out to save Daemon. And since the caves are normally where the Triarchy would retreat, they are forced to engage the Velaryons in a desperate battle that ends with them all being cut down. You can even actually show us the duel between Daemon and the Crab Feeder. Is this perfect? Nope. I'm sure there are problems with this. After all, I typed this as I thought it up with one hand while scratching my balls with the other. But something I know is true is that it's head and shoulders better than what we got. Episode 4 would normally be next, however, we can skip it. This is the only one where I honestly have no criticism of it. While it isn't my favorite episode, I can't deny that it has the best written story. Characters stay in character and follows the famous Matt Stone and Trey Parker advice of writing. Therefore, or but. Such a simple concept, but it can make your writing improve drastically. So now let's shimmy on over to episode 5, and lucky for me, it's the very first scene I have issues with. Daemon murdering his wife. Now, I'm not critical of Daemon actually killing his wife. I mean, morally speaking I am, that's just a dick move, but how he goes about it should be shown in classes in how to depict just straight dumb luck. He waits for her on, I assume, her usual hunting path, and enacts his master plan. That plan being spooking the horse by raising his hands, causing it to topple over and break her body under its weight. Then finishes her off with a rock because luckily she's paralyzed. Dozens of things could have gone wrong, and then suddenly Daemon would have been piss out of luck and dead. Had she been riding with someone, such as her cousin who she refused just moments before running into Daemon, then he would have been pissed out of luck. If she had simply not let him approach, then there would be nothing he could do, so he would be piss out of luck. Had she kept control of the horse like she presumably would have been able to since she is a skilled hunter, then Daemon would be piss out of luck. Had she fallen off the horse, but it didn't land on top of her, Daemon would have likely been piss out of luck. And this, like all these other issues I have, is an easy fix. And in fact, I have two ways. First is just having Daemon ambush her. Jumping off a high cliff or something, tackling her off her horse. They have a bit of a scuffle, but in the end, Daemon wins and kills her in a way that makes it look like an accident. Option 2, though. He uses his dragon Caraxes to cause a rock slide that crushes her. Boom. All done. That is literally all it takes. Oh, but would you look at that? This episode has another moment that makes me wonder if the writers of the show need to be administered into an assisted living facilities because I don't know how they function as adults. We all know exactly what part I'm going to talk about now. The wedding where Criston Cole beats the knight to death in front of everyone to see, but even more egregiously, pimp slaps the future king consort, Laenor Velaryon. The very least this man should have gotten was his hand cut off and sent to the wall. The more likely scenario is Corlys Velaryon will want that son of a bitch's head on a spike, and Viserys would have given it to him, no questions asked, since this was a murder that took place under his own roof during his daughter's wedding. I don't care how much influence you think Otto or Alicent have at the court. She is not going to be able to save Criston from this. So how do we fix this? Easy. Do what the fucking book does. Have a tourney to celebrate the wedding and let Criston kill Joffrey in either a joust or a melee on accident. I don't care how many people say the audience would get bored of having 2 jousts in a single show. That didn't stop them from having 10 small council meetings. Fuck off, that is retarded and you know it is. Nobody was getting bored watching A Knight's Tale, and that was 2 hours focusing solely on jousting. But if it is just impossible to keep an audience engaged with a joust or melee, because we know just how boring those can be, then how about you simply throw him in, declaring to everyone around that Joffrey had a dagger on him, which he did, and he was about to kill Rhaenyra. When questioned on this by the king, and maybe even Corlys, he lies and says he thinks he heard it mentioned that his motivation was jealousy that Laenor was getting married. Corlys, now worried that it might get out that his son is a bit of a rump stuffer, doesn't press the matter and actually ends it there, even forgiving Criston for harming his son. Is this great? Nope. But it makes more sense than Criston just walking out with no guards arresting him, tearing his armor off, ready to kill himself, only for Alicent to stop him, and then just skipping over everything. I'm starting to get an aneurysm. So we're going to skip episode 6 for the sake of my health, but also partly because episode 6, my issues with that are more subjective rather than objective. But luckily for me, episode 7 is next, and it's probably the second worst episode in the season. Starting with that dumbass conversation Corlys has with his wife Rhaenys, and how history doesn't remember blood. It remembers names, and because of that, Corlys is more than willing to be the laughingstock of the entire realm. Corlys, one of the most ambitious and prideful men in Westeros, who told the king himself to fuck off when he turned down his initial marriage pact and went off to start a war. This guy was willing to just roll over and take it? Screw you. I don't even like Corlys that much. He was a boring Gary Sue in the books, but he didn't deserve this kind of treatment. How about this? Instead of Corlys being a pussy, we make him keep the gonads he's been swinging around for most of the series. He confronts Rhaenyra on this, angry for his family to be slighted by hers again and again. So he threatens to pull his support and name Daemon's kids his heirs since they are not bastards. Rhaenyra does her best to change his mind, as losing his support would practically doom her. So she offers a marriage pact between her kids and Corlys' grandkids, meaning that Velaryon blood will still inherit Driftmark when he passes. That's not enough though. Corlys wants more. So, he makes one final demand. When Jaehaerys claims the throne, he does not change his name to Targaryen. he keeps it Velaryon. Bam! Corlys stays in character, Rhaenyra keeps her strongest ally, and the status quo is kept. A massive improvement over the father just being okay with the son being cucked for the entire realm to see. My next gripe with this episode is how the fight between the kids goes down, and this is a problem I have with the books as well, because I refuse to believe that Aemon can fly around on the biggest creature in the entire world, and not a single fucking guard sees or hears that shit and sounds the alarm. This, however, would mess up with the confrontation between Aemon and the Black Children. No, fuck. I mean the Team Black Children. So how about this instead? Aemon just so happens to try to claim Vhagar at the same time as Baela Targaryen does, who has her sister and cousins for moral support. Naturally, they run into each other and Team Black assaults Aemon. Being bigger and stronger than all of them, Aemon can fight them off easily enough, and even rather brutally begins to beat Jace, causing Luke to draw a dagger and slash Aemon across the face, taking his eye. This smell of blood disturbs Vhagar, who turns to the 5 children and roars, causing all but Aemon to run away, who is still on the ground clutching the wound on his face. Despite the wound, however, he still stands, and with his own 2 feet, climbs onto the massive beast, claiming it. Then when he lands, he is escorted by the waiting guards who take him to the throne room where only immediate family are there waiting. None of these distant or random-ass Velaryon cousins should be here to see what happens. I'll even let you keep the dumb standoff between Rhaenyra and Alicent, but only because I still have to go over the next dumb thing. Rhaenyra being the one who orchestrates the plan of Laenor faking his death. They try to justify this by saying with Daemon being Rhaenyra's husband, that her claim to the throne would not be so easily challenged. To which I would say, have you been watching the same fucking show as me? Her claim beat out Daemon's solely because everyone really fucking hates the guy. Even the misogynistic Otto Hightower thought it would have been better for Rhaenyra to be queen instead of Daemon being king. Not to mention, this doesn't fix the fact that your 3 eldest children are bastards. Doesn't matter how many more legit ones you pop up after, they're still bastards, and thus doesn't solve that issue with support in the slightest. This also risks her alliance with the Velaryons because of the rumors that spread soon after, and she acknowledges that these rumors would spread. Why in 7 hells would they support the woman who they think is responsible for their child's death? Plus, I don't care how good of a dragon rider Daemon is, he isn't worth risking the Velaryon support, who have several dragon riders, an army to call their own, and the most amount of wealth in the entire realm. You would need to be suffering from schizophrenia to ever think this is a smart idea. So, how would I fix this? It's easy. Make Daemon the sole organizer of these events. Since he benefits the most, it makes sense that he would be the one to organize and seize the opportunity. To hell with Rhaenyra's political position. He right now is trying to get himself to be the king of Westeros, even if that means being a consort to Rhaenyra. I doubt he would fake Laenor's death, so I would heavily advise him killing Laenor. But you can probably stretch Daemon being merciful in this instance, since he and Corlys had a lot of wars and yada yada yada, even though he killed his wife not too long ago. My second idea, which I'm not a fan of, is go with the fake death plan, but have Corlys and Rhaenys in on it. Good luck trying to convince them to go along with it. Maybe this is the moment Rhaenyra can offer the deal of the children will keep the name Velaryon, but honestly, I think my first idea is the only one that can realistically be done here. Episode 8 is on the chopping block now, and it's just one small thing. Rhaenys flying to King's Landing to voice her claim to Driftmark is dumb. That was never a realistic option, so instead she is in full support of her legit granddaughter's claim to Driftmark. I do have more subjective issues with the episode, but I think I'll save all of those subjective gripes for a future video. Especially since this is probably my favorite episode of the entire series. Episode 9, and fuck me, do I have to go over this episode? Everyone is in perfect agreement that this is the absolute worst episode. From Gerald Westerling being allowed to just leave, to members of the Kingsguard fighting in the streets like common thugs, And don't even get me started on Rhaenys bursting through the dragon pit. It's a dragon pit. It's made to stop dragons from breaking shit. Forget fixing one little moment. This entire episode needs to be drawn, quartered, and sent to the black cells so we never see it again. And finally, the final episode of the season. And how poetic to finish this off with the same damn complaints I made at the start of this series. That being, why the fuck does Otto go to parlay with the blacks all on his own? Where is Aemond on Vhagar? Where is Aegon on Sunfire? Why does this man insist on talking with people who want him dead, who ride fire-breathing monsters without any of his own to keep him safe? How to fix this? Easy. Just have it to where they send the Maester instead to parlay. Oh, and while we're at it, forget the scene where Rhaenyra walks through all the heavily armored men and knights, because that is also an equally idiotic choice to make. And there we go. That was the last episode, and we went over all the god-awful writing mistakes that I noticed. And keep in mind, I'm an idiot, so if I notice these issues, then you royally fucked up. I like the Hobbit trilogy, for fuck's sake. Entertaining me is not difficult. Here's hoping the next season is better. I want to be optimistic and say it would be difficult to be worse, but I've been let down before. Season 8, anyone? So instead, let's just sign off with this. What are your thoughts? Do you think that my complaints of the series is wrong? If so, why? Do you agree with my complaints, but you still think the good of the series elevates it above it all, and that you can look over most of it? Good on you, but for me, I just can't. So with that squared away, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.